Hello, Kansas and Western fans. Today it's time for another episode, I guess, of the series that I've been doing that explains how I've designed the track plans for each of the scenes of my layout. And this scene that we're going to talk about today is the Evraz Steel Mill in Pueblo, Colorado. So I think this is going to end up being one of the most operationally interesting scenes on the whole layout, besides maybe the two rail yards, because as you can see, it's quite a spaghetti bowl of track here. But there is a purpose for each one, and I'm going to go through explaining how I'm going to do, or what each purpose is. Now, up here in the benchwork above, I've laid out these photos that I've grabbed from Google Earth to kind of help to explain what I wanted to achieve. And these photos kind of look like a mess, but if you can zoom in on them, you can kind of understand what's going on. First of all, this is the actual plant where rail cars are delivered. And if you can see there, you can see all the string of gondolas that have been parked. And what I'm guessing are gantry cranes are located in there where they'll unload those and then dump those contents in the mill itself to be melted down and reproduced into other products. And I should say that the Evraz Steel Mill produces several products. Actual railroad track rail is one of the biggest ones. And in other photos that I don't have here, you can see where they have a plant nearby where they produce the quarter-mile long sections of rail for that welded steel rail. But they do lots of other things. They do rebar, and I think maybe culverts and stuff like that. But anyway, so that's the plant, or at least a good portion of it that I'm trying to represent in the layout. And then this is basically a field of where scrap that's come in is sorted. And you can see the different colors. They got a rust color there, multicolor there. And, without being part of the plant itself or having any knowledge, I couldn't tell you, which pile is which type of product or how it's sorted or anything like that. But that's part of the feel that I wanted to generate in my scene. And then over here is something else that's interesting. I've seen some videos on YouTube that describe the process of breaking down rail cars that are put out of service. And you can see there's a pile of old tank cars. That looks like a pile maybe of some box cars. You got some gondolas out of service, some grain cars. So they're kind of sorted there, and then they're cut up and turned into scrap, loaded again into gondolas, and you can see some here, and then sent into the plant. So these are the aspects that I'm trying to recreate. So we'll start off here with the main line as it comes around from La Junta Yard. And this was probably one of the most difficult aspects to figure out for the scene, because in the previous episodes that you probably have seen or maybe have seen, my layout, or my main line on my layout, is pretty straight. And it was starting to get a little bit boring for me. And it serves a purpose for being straight in those scenes, and that's fine. But over here on the Evraz plant, I wanted to change that up a little bit. And when I initially laid the main line, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do the plant. I just wanted to make sure I left a lot of space for it. But this segment here is about, I don't know, maybe 14 feet long. So I knew I'd have lots of room to work with. And so you can see the main line here, which is on the track that's on the right, how it kind of undulates a little bit. And it's because early on I was going to do another element of the Arkansas River because it is in that vicinity. And so the reason for the undulation of the main line was to represent following along the river. And I do think I am still going to do that, because there's another interesting scene nearby in the rail yard for Pueblo where there's a concrete big drainage ditch that goes right along the track. So I think I'm going to represent that here, but that's why the main line here isn't quite as straight as everywhere else. I just really wanted to change it up a little bit. And then when you do that, it results in having your secondary tracks be a little bit weird as well, instead of just perfectly straight. So you can see that first siding, it follows the main line as a siding would, and creates some interesting features for the track work there. So moving on from the main line, you can see that there is a siding where this train is parked, and that's for arrivals and departures for this operation. So trains would arrive from La Junta Yard, pull off here onto the siding, make sure they clear that turnout, and then there is a stub end track that follows the main line where it ends there, That is for both storage and for locomotives from the local train that arrived to be able to pull off of the train and clear out of the way, so the yard switcher, which is that locomotive there, can come and move those cars out of the way and then build a new train while the local waits on this stub end track for that new train to be built. And then that moves to the third track. If you're going to do all that without impairing the main line or blocking it, I guess, you have to have another runaround track, which is what this third track is, basically another siding, so that locomotives can move around the train that is parked there on the siding without getting in the way of mainline traffic. And I did try to do that as much as possible in my layout so I could have a pretty active main line without disrupting operations, or vice versa. Now, the reason why these stub end tracks are so long, these first two anyway, is because they don't serve as just a parking place for locomotives, but they can also be used for storage. And so extra cars that are part of the train or cars from the yard can be just placed there out of the way once they're loaded or unloaded. All right, moving on. So from these two sidings, we have this basically switch lead, and that leads back in this other direction. And this track is also plenty long for extra storage for cars, but this is where the yard switcher would be parked out of the way if it's not being used, or just for arrivals and departures to show up. And then from there, you have basically the switch lead, yard lead, whatever you want to call it, where all the turnouts are lined up to feed all these tracks. So you have the main line here on the left, the arrival departure track next to it, and then basically a runaround track, which is the third track. From there, you have these two tracks here that are kind of spread out. These would be the unloading tracks for the scrapyard itself. And just to remind you what we're talking about there, that would be these here. And I'll orient that in the same direction as we're looking. So you have that spread area with the track hoe and that scrap pile there. What I'm trying to copy here is these areas here. Now there's a lot more tracks. There's some that go this way. They're all over the place. I don't have room for all that, so I'm just trying to represent a single series here with a couple of tracks and then piles on either side for sorting. So that's what these two separated tracks here are for. Now, moving on from that, you have this far back track, and that track is right up here along the wall, and that's strictly for a switch lead, so that it can move back in this other direction to feed both this track here and the main plant tracks there. Those three unloading tracks that would feed the actual mill itself. This track here in the background, where you see these cars piled, this would be that breakdown track where cars are coming in to be scrapped, and that's why they're piled there, as they're just ready to be cut up. So that would represent this scene here that I'm trying to copy, where you have different types of cars piled up. You've got some trucks, you've got some axles, and all that. And then, as I mentioned, you have this turnout here that feeds both the main plant, those three tracks there, and then this track here, where you see those gondolas parked. This is going to be my finished product track, because I do want to have realistic operations. I want to do more than just have gondolas show up with scrap and have them parked for a while and then be put into the plant, and then that's it, because there is two parts to the operation, right? So scrap metal is a raw material for this process, the steel making process, and then the finished goods are what comes out of it. So this track here would be staged with loaded gondolas with new products, and you can see there we've got culverts, we've got some steel, and we've got some coiled wire here. So at the beginning of an operating session, this track would be probably completely loaded with finished goods that need to go outbound with trains that are leaving. So that is the point of all these tracks. This part is not quite yet done. You can see that building really needs a lot of work left to it. There's still no power to these tracks, but that's how I envision these operations going. Should be very interesting. It would definitely take a single operator to operate this whole facility by himself. But that's the explanation I have for the Evraz steel plant. I hope you found it helpful to understanding how I'm doing things for this scene. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer them. Or if you have any suggestions. This one is not quite done. I still have a few tracks to actually glue down. So if somebody has an interesting suggestion, I might be able to carry that out. Otherwise, appreciate your attention. Thanks for watching. There is one more thing I forgot to mention, and that is how the main line interacts with the scene as it enters and leaves the scene on either end. And so if you saw my video on how I designed the La Junta yard, I mentioned how I wanted the main line to be hidden between one scene and another. And, you know, as a viewer who's just walking up to the scene in the layout, that's going to be impossible. And so what I'm talking about is basically for photos and for maybe just the operator at the steel mill to kind of help with that immersion factor. But obviously, and when you're doing these transitions between your scenes, you know, you have to take that with a grain of salt, or, you know, whatever comment you want to use. Obviously, somebody walking down the aisle is going to be able to see all these scenes above, all these scenes below. And so doing scene transitions may seem kind of ridiculous from that perspective. But, you know, for myself, I do like taking photos of my layout. I like shooting video and publishing that. You know, and I appreciate everybody that watches those for sure. And I like the discussion that it generates and all that. But I do actually like to watch my own videos, you know, just like I like to watch anybody's videos, because, you know, we all like model trains. We all like real trains for one reason or another. But so I guess I would say these scene transitions that I'm talking about are for that purpose. And so I want to be able to, you know, from track level, be able to pan over or whatever and not automatically see La Junta yard like that. And so the point that I'm trying to make, and I guess it'd be more for La Junta yard to the steel mill, is I'm trying to do a transition here, and you can kind of see how it's marked. I'm going to do a hill that hides the main line, and then another hill in the back, so that when you are in the La Junta yard area, looking back towards Evraz, especially down the main line, you won't be able to see the plant because it'll be blocked by a hill and trees. And that's going to be especially useful for those engineered cab ride videos. And so I guess that's why I'm mentioning the scene transitions, is for purposes of really just photography, I guess you could say. And anybody else can lend another comment in that regard, but that's the point that I'm talking about. And then down here it'd be the same thing. So obviously, if you're just a viewer that walks in and looks at the layout, you can see the track disappears and goes nowhere. So I guess for the points of suspension of disbelief, you know, whatever comment you want to use, we're doing the same thing here. We're just trying to block that portal with a hill and some trees, and just to kind of hide the fact that, you know, the train just disappears randomly. And so I'm going to do another scene like I did at the other end here. Put a hillside cut on both sides of the track. So from a camera's perspective, you can't see down the aisle here, or you can't see that portal. So I just want to make a comment about that. I think I've mentioned scene transitions a lot in my videos. Not sure if the regular viewer understands what those are. I hope that kind of explains things. If anybody else has anything to add, please do so in the comments. I don't know everything, that's for sure. So if anybody can explain these better or just has anything to add, go ahead and leave a comment below. So just wanted to add that. I think that'll be about it for today. Thank you.